Welcome to the Gentleman's Talk, where the podcast talks about a man's battle with mental health, his personal experiences, and his journey to be a better soul. Hosted by James Dean Littlejohn.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Gentleman's Talk. Here we are on Tuesday. Look at me going for 3 days in a row. I hope we're okay. I hope we're having a good day. I hope we're the weather's a little bit miserable at the moment. Certainly noticed a difference in my attitude this morning. I wasn't as full of spring, no pun intended with the time of the year, but it really does affect me, not being able to go outside. It's raining outside. I can't do my usual routine, so I feel a little bit out of sorts today. But it is what it is, really, and there's not much I can really do about it apart from try and find a way of dealing with it, or picking myself up differently. What it has done really is given me food for thought today, to be honest, and I'm doing something a little bit unusual. I'm here. I've had my having my dinner break, and I fancied really talking, just on the basis that following on from the suit of talking about what we've been talking about over the last couple of days. And really that's like the signs, the warning signs. What are the warning signs your mental health's deteriorating? And I keep talking about looking after yourself, but how do you know to look after yourself apart from the obvious? We say to ourselves, we know our daily routine. We need a shower so we don't smell. Excuse me, I want to sip my tea a minute. Hold on. I just want to see gauge how hot it was. But yeah, we have to we manage ourselves on a normal daily basis. But one of the things that sort of become abundantly clear for me really was I never really knew the signs. Actually understanding the signs and breaking the signs down to what affects me and where actually understanding if I did have a mental health condition. I mean, obviously now I'm very educated in what the signs are for my own personal self, because obviously we're all different, we're all human beings. But I really think I need to highlight the fact of, what are the signs, because there might be people out there that don't realise that they're doing, these things. And, I've written down a few little bits actually, because, I wanted to sort of kind of break it down and then I can relate to these kind of topics. I've done this before and I really wanted to do it again because I was hoping that it would give people food for thought and maybe they go, okay, well, that's started happening, or yeah, I do that, and it's kind of one of those things where I like to look at the symptoms and give a little bit of a sort of kind of overview of my own my own experiences and yeah, I can certainly say that I relate to most of them. But one of the stats that really hit that home and made me want to really, kind of deal with this as much as I can was I was looking at stats and understanding that, 75% of suicide victims are predominantly men, which basically give a stat of, the stat that goes along with that is basically that there's a man or a guy that, kills himself every 20 minutes. Now, that's a really, really big statistic, isn't it, And I was actually chatting to someone today, and I had a really, really good conversation. And it came abundantly clear that, we aren't looked after, and we don't look after ourselves. And no one really knows, and I've spoke about this before, no one really knows how to talk about these things. But how do you know to talk about the things if you don't know what the signs are? And obviously some of them are quite obvious. Some of them are like, if you're getting suicidal thoughts, you must know, and most people would know that that's not the norm. So that's a really easy sign to think of. But there's so many other signs that can give you a really early warning to the fact that you might be on a slow decline with your mental health. One of the ones that I really, really can relate to is one of the signs is feeling irritable. So, if you're feeling irritable on a daily basis or you're getting annoyed all the time, I mean, we get irritable anyway as humans because we're in a fast-paced life. Life nowadays is just fast-paced. So that's a bit of a difficult one to understand because you feel irritable at work. You could have a workload, you could come home, your home life could be a bit irritable because, you've got children that, are growing up and learning things, and they've got their own things to go through, and you almost become a counsellor as a parent. If you're constantly feeling irritable, and I mean constantly, so everything irritates you, and it's not just a one-day thing, or, you're a bit tired from a week away or whatever, or you've been on a course, for instance, like my irritability last week. When you're irritable all the time, that can really indicate something a little bit deeper, and that could be one of the signs, especially if you start sort of lashing out, or little minor things that you wouldn't normally sort of worry about. Will kind of like pick you up a little bit, and it's kind of like a sign, really. And if you've got little minor things that are bothering you, with regards to normal day, I mean, it's weird because sometimes people get irritable with regards to people eating crisps or people smacking their lips. We've all got these little hang-ups, haven't we? Certain people will do certain things certain ways that will annoy you, which is fine. We're all humans, and we all understand that certain things do annoy us. I've got my own little hang-ups that annoy me. I remember for years in my old job that we used to hang things up on racking to spray them, and they had to be hung up by wire. Now, it used to irritate me that people would cut stuff down and put it on the rack, the shelving rack, and leave the wire hanging, and that used to wind me up because to me it signified laziness. So I didn't really get irritable with it because it was just a bugbear with me. Listen to the rain, that's pouring down. But one thing I really did start noticing was everything would irritate me, just like people's voices, the tone of people's voices, or the topic they would talk about. And I still get that. I still get to the point where sometimes, and I think that that's one of those unfortunate things with PTSD is, it never goes away, so you have to learn to cope with it. So you have to learn to deal with it. But it was certainly a sign that I really, really sort of noticed. And when I look back now, I could understand knowing that that was one of the signs that I was irritable very, very early on. It's a key part. If you're getting irritable about everything and things that you know yourself, whether something would annoy you or bother you. If it's out of the usual pattern of things annoying you, then obviously you've got something a little bit deeper. So that's a really interesting sign to look out for. Another one is that I still suffer from now is sleeping patterns, or shift in my sleeping patterns. What do I mean by that? Some people sleep too little, some people sleep too much, and I've done both, if I'm brutally honest, and all the way through my depression, my sleeping patterns were horrendous. There'd be days where I wouldn't sleep, my mind would be firing, absolutely crazy. I spoke about this yesterday. Then I would get to the point where I was exhausted and I would sleep, or I would just get to the point where I'd had enough of the world and I just wanted to sleep. And if you're doing above the normal sleeping pattern of a human being, and I'm talking regular sort of sleeping patterns here, I'm not talking about shift patterns, I'm talking about if you're not getting your solid 7 hours of sleep, I don't know, I think that probably the government guidelines on that has probably changed, but roughly 7 hours sleep, 7 to 8 hours sleep. There'll probably someone will say it's 12 because they like being lazy, but the normal people, 7 hours sleep is adequate, isn't it? I think they say you can function on 6 hours sleep normally, but they recommend 7 to 8 for recovery and body. And they don't realise how much and how important sleeping is in your recovery, and that is why it's such a big part of depression, I think, because when your sleeping's out of sync and you're not getting your regular sleep and you're not getting your regular hours and you're sporadic all over, that can then lead into other things. So your irritability can be heightened because you're tired, you're irritable as anyway. So all these little things, they all sync into each other. Succinct, I think that's a word. In sync. They're in sync. Succinct. There is a word there somewhere, but I don't know what it is. Every cog fits together and all relates to things. So you can feel irritable but not actually have the symptoms because you're just irritable on that day. You've had 1 day's sleep. But if it's prolonged, then there's a problem. Same as shift patterns. And a lot of this will be based on the prolonged pattern of it. Sleeping habits, yeah, all right, we go out and some people go out drinking, and your sleeping patterns, if you have a Friday night or a Saturday night out into town, then your sleeping patterns, or even a midweek, a bit of a wet Wednesday, where you sort of kind of have a couple of jars on a Wednesday, your sleeping pattern's not going to be regular because alcohol does affect you massively. But if it's prolonged and it gets to the point where we're not talking about a weekend and then a week to recover, if you're at my age especially, we're talking about prolonged periods. So we're talking a couple of 3 months and it just hasn't come out and this is now becoming the norm. Then that's, again, a sign of something a bit deeper that you need to explore. That sort of encompasses in really with sort of that constant feeling of depression or being depressed. And now we all know, and I think that sometimes the word depressed can be overused, and it is abused a little bit nowadays. I've had to have a couple of conversations with my daughter. She said she's feeling depressed today, and I said, no, you're just feeling a bit low. Let's not sort of kind of underrate the word depression by just adding it to everything when you feel just sad. We're humans. We have emotions. We feel these emotions, and they can be roller coaster of a ride. But depression is, I don't think it's given the kudos that it really needs. Because proper depression, and I say proper because when you're in, and I'm not saying look at me, play me a violin, but I've been depressed. I've been to that point where there's no return almost, and if I was a little bit weak-minded, I suppose, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but if I'd been slightly weaker-minded, I probably wouldn't be here now talking to you, if I'm brutally honest, because of feeling depressed, the sleeping habits, and all the other things that go along, the irritability. Those things would have consumed me so much that I wouldn't be here now, and I've been to that point, so I can fully appreciate what the word depression really means. But if you're constantly feeling sad, which, it can be fine to feel sad at times. We all feel sad. You might have an argument with a partner. You might have a kid, one of your daughters or sons that's making you feel a little bit crappy, or you go to work and somebody at work's not making you feel great. So we all feel these symptoms, but feeling depressed really can be observed in so many different ways, such as, whether you've got a loss of interest that you've loved. So if you do something you've always loved and you've always enjoyed it and it's always given you a good feeling, and all of a sudden you don't do that anymore, that's the feeling of depression. Those are the signs and symptoms that your mental health is in decline. So again, another really important sign to look out for. But again, look for the prolonged period on that one, because at the same time, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel a bit low from time to time. And you might have a sport that you do, but you just don't feel like doing it. Like I love wakeboarding, but as you can tell, it's warm outside, but it's raining and it's a bit cloudy. So I wouldn't want to enjoy wakeboarding on that day. So I wouldn't class myself as depressed, but I haven't been wakeboarding for 2 years. Now, I love wakeboarding, I really do, and I haven't been for 2 years. So I want to change that because I'm working on myself and I'm bettering myself. But at the same time, it does give me a little bit of a fear going, because I've been before the sort of 2 years, and I used to love it and it made me feel great, and I chased that all the time. But yeah, it got to the point where I would do it and then I wouldn't get the high. So I'm scared that I'm going to do it and then not get the high and then not enjoy it anymore. And I don't want that feeling, because it encompasses everything that I enjoy. It's adrenaline sport. It's a board sport. It's water. It comes with great ethos, camaraderie, team building. It's just a really good sport to get involved in, and it really saved me, if I'm brutally honest. But I'm just a bit concerned that I'm not going to enjoy it again. But, I've got to give it a go. It opens in 2 weeks, and I'm hoping to go along. Even if I go along on my own, it doesn't bother me. I just want to give it a go and get out in the water. The way I'm feeling now, my back feels like I'm about 90, so I'm not sure how I'm going to get on with it. But, it's one of those things. But another sign that's really important to look out for is if you're feeling isolated, or you isolate yourself from family and friends. That's a really big a really big point to make. And I think that people that don't understand depression in any form won't understand what it's like. And I've deleted so many people off social media before I came off social media. I've deleted so many people because I just felt sad seeing their lives, and I felt sad that they didn't engage with me. So it was kind of like I ended up isolating myself quite a bit. And although it has given me the ability to enjoy my own company, which I do enjoy my own company, very much so. I've grown to love it over the last 10 years because I've had to. My hand's been forced, but during that time I've been on holidays on my own, so I'm content in my own company. I had to because I felt like I was going to hurt people, but not physically, but emotionally, So, and I was hurting myself. But if you're constantly being isolating yourself from your friends and family, and avoiding social situations that would normally help boost your mood, then you've got an inner problem, and there is a problem. So have you noticed how these signs, although they're prolonged periods, 3 months isn't a long time to start seeing signs. So if you're doing that and you're isolating yourself from social situations, I still do that now. People invite me around and I still get a little bit of anxiety. I still get to the point where, is it going to be as good as they make out? And I'm learning and adapting to overcome that and just go with it and just have a go. Do you know what I mean? We all sit, and one of the things I've noticed with depression is you can actually get consumed with your own self-pity. And sometimes people don't want to pull themselves out of that self-pity because maybe they like the attention, and it does come with a little added bit of attention, I suppose. When you get the right people around you, they will be like, "Oh, you're okay," and they will mollycoddle you a little bit. But at the same time, you've got to look at yourself inwardly if that's the reason why you're doing it, and you're not trying to manage your own mental health to be a better person. Because for me, when I'm in a low mood, and I was only there last week, it's a horrible place to be because you do isolate yourself. You switch yourself off from everything. Things become irritable. I was gaming, like I said to you a week or so ago, and it got to the point where I was really angry with the situation. I didn't want to be there. And I didn't want to play the game, but I normally love it. And I spent the best part of 6 to 8 months not playing games, so I knew that was when I had a problem, and that was only last year. So I know for a fact that I'm still going through this process. I know for a fact I'm still going to get dark days. I know for a fact I'm still going to get low moods. But I'm learning to develop my coping mechanisms away from the ones I would have done where I'd shut myself away and actually going, that's no good. Get out there and enjoy life. And that's where I talk about you've got to start with yourself. And I've understood that, so I'm embracing it. And I'm managing it now. And I actually excited about travelling and all sorts. I want to go away next month if I really could, just because I want to get away. I just want to enjoy and travel and experience culture, and that's what gives me the thrill now. It's not so much the little things, but I enjoy travelling, and that's one of my things. At the end of the day, it was said best by I can't remember his name. It was I'm going to say the film because my mate's going to tell me later if it doesn't come up before. It's the Chinese guy that was in Shanghai Nights. Tell me what it is when you get hold of it. Anyway, he said something. Basically said you can get money back, but you can't get time back. So travel while you can, and work later on to get the money back if you need the money. So, but at the same time, we also need an element of money to go travelling. So, it's okay saying that if you're a rich person, I suppose. But again, another prolonged period. But with isolating yourself, you will then, what you don't realise is just by how they all fit into each other is if you're isolating yourself, then you're going to feel depressed. If you're going to feel depressed, then you're going to have sleeping habit problems. And if you're going to have sleeping problems, you're going to have irritability. So they can all work in conjunction with each other to make your symptoms worse. So you need to address these signs, and there is some really obvious signs here. Another one which I struggle with myself, and that's the inability to focus. Now, I've proved that I don't want to accept that. So I've done lots of education. So my inability to focus on normal things was hard. So I focused so much on work that I couldn't focus on being a dad or being a partner, being anybody, even being a friend. I was focused on work because I was like, I don't want to accept the fact that I can't focus on those. Really, that consumed me quite a bit, and it was detriment to my health again. Not so much working in conjunction with the inability to focus, because some days we get days where we don't want to focus, we're just tired and stuff like that. So, but again, look at this prolonged period. If you've got a prolonged period where you have an inability to focus for a long period of time, then that is going to be an indication that you've got bigger problems. Another one, really, that's and I've written all these down, so I've written the little topics down because I can relate to them in every single sense as well. It's in some sort of way I've related to something. Another one was my shift in appetite. Now I still battle with that now, and I don't get me wrong, I love food. Who doesn't nowadays? It's about the only thing we've got for the pandemic, isn't it? But what I noticed was I don't tend to plateau since I've had depression. I tend to go up and down. I tend to go to spells where I don't eat, and then I go through spells where I do eat a lot. I think we all go through that, though. And I think that, is it a focus point of mental health problems? I think it is, because, we've got anorexia, bulimia, obesity. We've got all those little categories that all can be exacerbated by the fact of how you feel. So you can emotionally eat. So, I certainly do. When I feel low, I want to go out and get chocolate and smash fizzy drinks down because it gives me the sugar rush. Really what I'm chasing is the sugar high. I'm not actually chasing the food as such. If anything, I feel guilty when I do eat a lot. And when I don't eat, I don't tend to notice it. But what I did notice, when I focused heavily on work, the biggest thing I noticed was I wouldn't eat. So I would go into work and people would physically make me dinner or make me, something. Come round, you've got toast round here. I'd have to physically be forced round to the tea bar because... And then even then I would eat it and they'd all have theirs and joviality would kick in and they'd have a bit of fun. And I'd be sat around the corner working and not eat. And then I'd get to the end of the day and I'd be exhausted. So you're seeing how all these things, if you don't deal with them in their little ways, can create bigger problems. And that moves me on slowly to one that is probably, I think, the most obvious. For me, it was the most obvious. And I'm a bit vain, if anyone really truly knows me. I do like to look after myself, but one of the things I did notice was my personal hygiene dropped. And I don't mean I was walking around smelling, because I don't walk around smelling, but I would stop looking after my hair. I would stop getting haircuts. I would stop buying nice clothes. I wouldn't really be bothered about what I look like. So for me, the personal hygiene can mean anything. You can stop showering, you can stop using deodorants, you can not bother, cutting your hair, or just generally not looking after yourself. I tried to make the effort, and some days I would, I've always been a bit conscious about myself anyway, but the poor hygiene for me was when I just stopped having a haircut, and then I would almost get a high around about sort of 2-3 months, and I'd go and get it all completely chopped off, and I'd feel young, and it'd get me that high again. And I've only had that recently. I went to the barber's last week because I felt crap and I wanted to go and get my hair cut. Not last week, week before, sorry. And already now it's grown to the point where I feel old again. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel like I'm taking care of myself. And you've got to really notice that as a sign when you're not looking after yourself. So hygiene really is, kind of one of those things. And when you're suffering from the mental health, it's common to go into survival mode, as they call it. And that's where you don't really think about, your personal hygiene. You go into almost like a standby mode, really. You just kind of sort of sit and just do the basics. So, what do I mean by survival mode? Well, survival mode, if anyone knows what that means, it's where you just concentrate on the bare essentials to get you through. Little things like showering, brushing teeth, or even combing your hair can become a chore, a task you don't really want to do. So, you'll wash your hands, you'll wash your armpits under the sink or whatever you do. You'll do the basic. You won't iron your clothes. You'll just put a pair of clothes on and this is what I am. You see a lot of men. I think when I see men now and I see people with big beards, and trust me, I absolutely adore my beard. I get the odd day here and there where it irritates me a little bit, but ultimately I do love it. But when I see men with big hairy beards that don't look groomed, I automatically think, well, why has he stopped shaving? Is it because he can't be bothered? He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't care what he looks like. And when you see them as an outsider and you go, well, he's not grooming his beard. He looks tatty. He's not smelling fresh, so to speak. Doesn't stink, but doesn't smell like you would expect someone who cares for himself with a little bit of cologne on or something, a little bit of aftershave. And for me, that's a really big sign. And I often look at men and go, he's all over the place. And that became quite realistic for me when I went and got my hair cut. And I was chatting to the guy and he said, do you want your beard trim? And I paid £30 for like a head massage. I told you in the podcast, head massage a lot. It felt amazing. It really did. He was chatting to me and he said, this guy, he said, had a huge beard. He said it was absolutely like, it was like a foot long down the bottom. He'd grown it for 2 years. And the guy was like, yeah, well, the Turkish guy was going to give him an amazing trim because they love their beards. It's in their blood, isn't it? The Turks absolutely love a beard. So, for them, a beard is a sign of stature, isn't it? And this guy came in with an incredible beard and he was like, I'm going to do this. And the guy turned around and said, no, shave it off. The guy was like, what? He's like, shave it off. He said, I've not looked after myself for 2 years and I'm making a change. So it just goes to show how sometimes what you perceive as somebody growing their beard to be, hip, as it's quite an in thing nowadays, isn't it? We've kind of reverted back from the clean-shaven suits to beards and rugged, looks, I suppose. And you take for granted, you think, oh, he's just grown his beard, that's glorious. Maybe he's not. Maybe he just can't bother to shave. He doesn't want to shower. Maybe you haven't got close enough to realise that he has got problems. Maybe you can't see it in his face. Maybe he's just hiding, I don't know, double chins and he doesn't want to feel bad, so he's grown a beard. I mean, that's how I started growing my beard, because I felt like I was a bit chubby. So rather than deal with and I'm feeling my chins now, rather than deal with it, I just went, grow a beard to start with. And plus, I'd shaved for 21 years and I'd had enough of shaving. So I was like, no, I'm going to move on from that now. But personal hygiene is a real big thing. And I think it's overlooked in men because men are genuinely, how do I put this without sounding like a complete arsehole? Men don't normally care for themselves. We're not prissy people, are we? We don't. I mean, obviously, diversity has changed a little bit in the dynamic of the world at the moment, and men tend to look after themselves a lot more than they used to. Certainly, in the olden days when there was coal mines and steelworks, no one really cared. They just wanted to get to the pub and crack on. They were just happy to be alive at the end of the day. Whereas nowadays, we're all in desk jobs and stuff like that. Most of us, not all of us, I say, use the word loosely. But it's really important to acknowledge and see those signs, because sometimes you might actually look from the outside. You might see these signs from the outside now. And this is why I'm telling you. You might see these signs in your friend and go, well, your beard's looking a bit unhealthy, mate. Have you thought about grooming it? Or have you thought about doing this? And they go, no. And then you start noticing a few other things about them. Nails not cut, a little bit smelly, not really taking care of themselves, not looking after wearing crappy clothes or whatever. You could look at it and go, oh, actually this is a bigger problem than I realised. And that's why these signs are important, not just for the person, for you as an individual trying to better yourself, but from the outside looking in. It's really important to acknowledge that. Another one that's sort of kind of really important is illogical thinking. Now, I wrote this down because I was a bit like, how can I relate to this? Well, I can relate to this because what I mean by illogical thinking, well, basically it's like unusual beliefs in your powers, I suppose, is where to, or your thinking that you're something special. So this is quite an aggressive thing to think about. It's not really something you would it's almost like that God complex. And sometimes depression can work the other way. You can actually go, I am a God power, and those types of symptoms I find, for me, I never felt that. I never felt like I was on top of the world. I think that was counterintuitive to what I felt. But at the same time, acknowledging that can be a sign for people where they go and they start doing... I mean, I do have an element of it where I don't shout about it. I don't go, oh, look at me. But I'll go out and like I said, I can revert back to 3 or 4 years ago when I started wakeboarding, and my goal was to do a backflip off of a kicker. Now, a lot of people were like, dude, you've been wakeboarding 6 months, mate. There's no way, you just want to learn to hit the kicker and stuff like this. Just take your time without trying to do a backflip. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it. So I think that was probably my illogical thinking, if I could put a context onto it. Because I did. I logically thought, unfortunately for me, I did do it. I managed it in about 12 weeks of trying. There was a lot of pain. And I think one session, I did a 15-minute session. And in that 15-minute session, I tried the backflip about 20 times and didn't land it. And if you've seen a backflip on the wakeboard, just Google it. It's pretty intense. Well, it wasn't called a backflip. It's called a tantrum. That's what I was looking, not a backflip, tantrum. Because it was done off of a kicker on a cable, so they call it a tantrum. So just Google tantrum and you'll see what I was... And I can still do it now. It probably really hurt, but I only did it a couple of years ago, just before the last wakeboard session. I managed to do 4 in one session. So I've still got but that works on muscle memory, doesn't it? So muscle memory gives you that ability to redo things. It's like riding a bike. Once you've ridden a bike... I haven't ridden a bike for a long time, but I know for a fact I can jump on a bike and do it, It's just muscle memory. Your brain is functioning and it holds it in the long-term memory bank, doesn't it? So it knows what to do. But you might have somebody that's feeling like that and you go, the way I would give you a tip on that really is it unusual for them to be like that? Are they normally a quiet person, or is this the norm for them? If it's a norm for them, then maybe, it's okay. But is it the norm for them, but it's been exacerbated, as in they're making it a bigger point than it normally is? And then you start looking at the other steps then, and you start looking at the lack of sleep, or the personality, or the hygiene. You start looking at those other areas, which is why it's really important to look at those signs inwardly as well as outwardly to other people. And sort of cap it off really with the symptoms I've seen and I can sort of experience would be, one of the biggest things to me was a persistent feeling of guilt. I always thought no one loved me. Everything was my fault when it went wrong. I beat myself up a lot when things were going wrong. I thought, well, I'd almost call myself stupid or a loser. And I did that a lot, and anybody that's worked alongside me will know that I beat myself up. I'm my biggest critic, which is quite a negative, and I still do that now because it's a big negative, because there's been times where I've done things and I've done what might be perceived as a good job on the outside. I think I've done some artwork in my office, and I painted it and airbrushed it all on and put loads of detail in it, and it looked okay, but I wasn't happy, so I beat myself up and painted it. I didn't beat myself up physically, but beat myself up mentally and went, no, move on. I've created something better now. But at the same time, it was a wasted 2 days and a lot of mental sort of kind of sort of ambushed me mentally, really. But that persistent feeling of guilt is a horrible thing. But again, that is a very, very prevalent sign for longer problems. For me personally, I think that mental health is such a big deal, and often it's bigger than we actually really give ourselves credit for. And a lot of us don't really sort of kind of understand the signs and symptoms. And I've spoke previously about making sure you talk to your friends, get out there. But actually trying to understand that mental health is a bigger thing than you realise. And that's really important to understand these signs and symptoms. And although there's only 6 or 7, I think I've said there's 6 and 7, but they mean a lot, as in, if you can acknowledge and you can pick up those signs early, you can help save a life. almost, like I said, 75% of suicides are men. That's a person killing themselves every 20 minutes. When you put that into context, and you're sat there for 7 hours a day, and you think to yourself, okay, that's 2 people an hour, isn't it? Well, 24, 60, you couldn't even think there's 3 people an hour. So you sit there for your hour, like I sit here for most of the times, and in the space of time from me doing my podcast, 3 people have died somewhere. 3 men have killed themselves, and that is the brutal facts of this. So it's really important to get education out there and understand what those signs are, because if you've never felt depression before, you're not susceptible to depression. I know I've got, my best friend is, although I've seen signs and symptoms, not of depression, but signs and symptoms of him when he's feeling low, and I've helped him and he helps me. Would he have known about this 10 years ago? No, he didn't, because he never, it's not on his radar. It's not on anybody of my family's radar. No one really understands it. It's only taken me to educate myself to understand what the signs and symptoms are, understand what to look out for. And even when it's okay to know now, and I've probably learnt these things over the last 10 years, from the last 10 years. But for me personally, if I'd have seen these signs and I was open and honest and talking to people, or I had friends that understood what I was feeling and the depth that can feel, I think that this would be a different outcome. I don't think it would have reached the pinnacle it has now, to the point where I'm having to almost rebuild my life. And I'm not blaming them, because it's not their fault at all. If anything, I would say we're just not educated enough. I would also say that, like my last podcast, man up, that's almost the rhetoric that was given to people, that if you were feeling sad and you were feeling down as a man, you were told to man up, get on with it, just get on with it, mate, soldier on, and I've said that to you. In actual fact, look at the bigger picture here and go, if I offer my advice or I offer my support in some sort of way, even if I don't understand, even if you don't understand mental health, you will know that someone around you, if you've got a good friend or a good partner that really loves you, or good parents or good siblings, they will know and understand what the signs and symptoms are, or you're out of character. And that's the biggest word there. Is the person out of character? If he's out of character, is it a one thing? Is it a one-day thing? Or is it a prolonged period? Now, that's going to be difficult, because you might be making friends with somebody and not know them, and you've met them through their depression. So in actual fact, you might not know what they were like before. You just know them as what they are now. So you might not see that. But that's where the education comes in, and that's why I'm talking about these signs and symptoms. So you can look out for them. You might actually sit there and go, okay, I'm doing that. I need to fucking sort myself out. Or you might go, do you know what? I haven't seen James for a long time, or James hasn't spoken to me for a few days. That's a bit out of character. Is everything okay? I certainly get that now all the time from my friends. If I don't talk for a day, they're on me like, all right, mate, how's things? I've not heard from you today. And that's really what we need. It's really important to sort of kind of get that support, because just that one message might make a massive, massive difference to that person's life, or that day, to the point where, they don't make that really, really negative decision to end their life, because you stepped in before it can be a problem. So signs and symptoms are such an important value to understand, and we look for them all the time. And this is what I find difficult, because if you've got a cold, you see a sign and a symptom, you take a paracetamol. You all right, that's good. You see your arm broken, you go to the doctors, and you get your arm in plaster. You see those signs and symptoms, but unfortunately, and it's still, I don't know whether it'll ever go away, but unfortunately, mental health is an invisible disease. It's an invisible illness. As proven by me, I've had it for 10 years, and hand on heart say that it's only become really obvious to people because I'm honest now with myself, and I talk openly. This is why I love this podcast. But would it have been like that before? I don't think it would have been, and that's where men don't talk. And because they don't talk, they don't recognise the symptoms. But sometimes it can just take you to look at your friend and go, there's something not right there, mate. And instead of just giving it a stiff ignoring and moving on and going, he'll be all right, and then before you know it, that evening, he's gone out and he's killed himself. That's the reality of this. And it happens. And this is what I can't emphasize enough, that you can be the most sanest person in this world. You can be the happiest person in this world if you really want to be. But that day that you're not happy and you've had these prolonged periods of lack of sleep, lack of hygiene, lack of care, you're not getting the empathy from around you, the mind works in a really, really dark way. And unfortunately, it takes that split second and you're done. That's it. You've made that split decision. Sometimes this isn't a build-up. As I said, I was performing to a very, very exceptional standard at work. I was delivering. I was trying to do what I could. But at home or in my room, I was screaming. I was literally screaming and crying and just not happy. And that's when I felt the need to give up, was when I was in those parts, because I didn't have that focus. Now, no one messaged me in the evenings. No one said, how are you, mate? Nowhere near the level of a conversation I have with people now, because I nurture that and they nurture it with me, and they look after me and I look after them. And that's really important. But there can be really, really shit difficult times. And if you don't see the signs and symptoms, you may be too late. So it's really important to acknowledge those signs and symptoms. And that's why I really wanted to highlight it on the back of talking about yesterday and talking about sort of manning up. And then on the back of that, I thought, well, how do you know what level of depression have they got? What level of sadness have they got? Is it a day thing? Is it a week thing? And that's where you really need to look after your friends and look after your family members, look after the people that are close to you, because if you recognise it, you can put a stop to it. You can actually actively encourage that person to not do silly things and go, no, mate, pull yourself together, or not pull yourself together because that's the wrong word. Let's work on this together. That's the word I'm looking for, not pull yourself together. You can work with that person to make lives better. You'll create a better bond. You'll create a better friendship. You'll create a better partnership. When you lose that dynamic of looking after and caring for that person, it can all sink away. And before you know it, you're then back in that really horrible place of lack of sleep, lack of care, and not wanting to be on this planet. And that can happen overnight with depression. And it is a constant battle, and I think that people don't really give it the justified respect that it needs to understand that mental health, with a statistic like that, person dying every 20 minutes, when you look at that statistic, it's really, really scary statistic. I think I was listening on the news yesterday that they were saying in Essex there was something like 2,500 suicides that had been uninvestigated. They just put it down to person was in a low place. So it just goes to show the lack of support you can get from the NHS, which, do we deserve that support? To a degree, yeah, I do. But at the same time, I acknowledge that the NHS is strained as it is. So what we can do is help ourselves. Instead of relying on going to someone to talk to somebody and relying on the NHS system for us to help us, or whatever support system you have, relying on that support system, you can actually do it for free. For free. You can actually be your friend's confidant. You can be your friend's support. You can support each other, whether that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, however many people you've nurtured into your close group. You can all bounce off each other. But when you sit there and you don't acknowledge and you don't talk to your friends and you don't engage with them, when they've engaged with you, you're then isolating yourself. You're then on your own path. You're then doing your own thing. And I think that is the path to a rocky road. You need to build things together. You need to build together, because if you don't build together, then you're setting yourself up for failure, because nobody in this world Nobody in this world can do anything on their own. I don't mean that in a negative. Of course, people can do things on their own, but you look at all successful people, and they've done it with a team. They've done it with a group of people. You look at successful relationships, it's because they work together as a team. You look at successful friendships, it's because they work together as a team. All these things are incorporated and working with as a team. You know, like I said to you at the start of this podcast, a problem shared is a problem halved. Instead of sitting there and dwelling on the whole thing, talk to your friend. He might not be able to advise you because he won't have experience in this. But at the same time, he can go, dude, that sounds shit, mate. We need to get ourselves together. Let's book something in. Let's go for a walk. I'm coming over now. Do you know what I mean? Or all these things can become relevant, and they can be saved by having someone to talk to. The people that I know that have committed suicide, and these are people I know their story, they've all committed suicide because they didn't have someone to talk to. You look at the recent one, my good friend Jamie, rest in peace to him. He gave up just before Christmas because he didn't have a woman to share Christmas with. But he had everything. So from the outside, he looks incredible. Yeah, he's got everything. He's just qualified. He's getting loads of money. He's going to be happy as Larry. In actual fact, he just wanted the basics. He just wanted a relationship. And he didn't have that. And we all took it for granted. And then he said, I've had enough of this life. And from seeing his friends one night, 2 nights later, he wasn't here anymore. He'd killed himself. That is how quick mental health can deteriorate to the point of no return. And that is why you need to look at these signs and symptoms. You need to acknowledge these signs and symptoms. And you need to work on yourself to stop these signs and symptoms. There's ways and means to do this. You know, there's ways and means to adjust this. But it all ultimately starts with, you know, looking after yourself. It's not a rocket scientist. If you look after yourself, you will nurture yourself in better ways. If you're feeling irritable, it's probably because of the lack of sleep. Well, you need to get some more sleep. So you need to go to the point where you need to get to a doctor and say, and this is how I got back into my sleeping pattern originally, was I went to my doctor and he gave me a week's worth of sleeping tablets. I took them, I felt groggy the next day, granted, but I got into a sleeping pattern again. And then I went, right, okay, so I've obviously got, excuse me, is it 40, 47? Oh, I'm getting better now. I'm on the 47 minutes now rather than the 40 minutes where I get the windy build-up. I'm talking too much. But yeah, it's if you're feeling irritable, your sleeping pattern's probably out of kilter because you're overthinking things. So by talking to your friend and acknowledging that with your friend, you're sharing the problem. And I notice now when I share my problems or I share my feelings and talk about my feelings, and I'm not saying fluff me up and all this sort of stuff, but just talking about stuff, you know, it's not about fluffing, it's just about talking to people. It's not about categorising it, it's not about labelling it. Oh God, he's being fluffy again. It's not about that. It's about acknowledging the fact that you've spoke to somebody, and because you've got that weight off your mind, you will sleep better. You'll wake up the next morning feeling less irritable, a little bit more engaged. Be careful, because I used to get to that point and then the next day I'd feel great and I'd have really serotonin high and I would absolutely obliterate myself during the day, and then I'd be exhausted again, and then I'd be sat there, and because I'd have built myself up. So you've got to do things in steps. You know, that's the most important bit, is doing things in steps. And by just gearing yourself up to understand that these things are, you know, they're happening to you right here and now, you'll be able to act on them. If you can act on them, you can build yourself up. If you've got somebody you can talk to, you can open up to them, and I'm having these problems, or I'm having, whether it's, mate, I can't perform sexually. All right, what's going on then, mate? And who else can you talk to if you can't talk to your friend about those sort of things? Or, Christ, mate, I haven't crapped for 2 days. All right, it's probably because you haven't eaten, mate. I've noticed this. You've not been eating properly. What's your diet like? All right, it's crap. Not had much water. So, all right, well, that's why then, mate. You constipate yourself because you're not having a good diet, because you're not taking care of yourself. Oh yeah, I'm sat there and I've got this inability to focus. Okay, well why? Just I'm finding it really hard. My brain's fuzzed. Okay, let's talk about it. Let's get it open. Let's get it out in the open. Pop round. We'll have a chat. Have a cup of tea. Private walk. Whatever you want to do. But all of these symptoms, they all cancel each other out when you start working on them. So as you work on your inability to sleep, and when you offload your problems with your friends and share them, you create a really good bond with that person, because you're talking about your feelings, and everyone knows that when you talk about your feelings, you are going to feel good about yourself. You are going to relieve you sitting there at 1 o'clock in the morning with your brain firing around, overthinking, people don't like me, they don't love me, I'm a loser, I could have done this better, what a loser I am. You won't think like that. You'll just go to bed, rest up. So when you manage yourself and deal with yourself, that's when you get better. And this is what it's about. If you've got to recognise yourself, but at the same time, that person may not notice it, but you may notice it. So to play devil's advocate on that bit, if you notice it, go and help that person. Dude, I've noticed that you're feeling, you're not really looking after yourself, mate. Hair's looking a bit shabby, mate. I tell you what, mate, should we go out on Saturday? We'll get our hair cut, we'll go for a pint and a meal and have a chat. That's how easy it is. That is literally how easy it is. The annoying thing is, we did this all the time as children. As children, I always went down once a month. We went down collectively to the hairdressers. We all sat in, I can't remember his name, Pete, that was it, Pete. We all sat in Pete the hairdresser's in Amesbury, where I used to live. And we all got a discount because we used to come, he was basically a mate of mine from school. It was his dad. So we went down there every month in a little gaggle. We used to sit there. We didn't have mobile phones, so we had to talk, God forbid. We'd read magazines, FHM. We sat there reading FHM or Nuts, the two magazines we used to sit. And we used to just spend the morning, and then by the time everyone had got their haircut from 9 till probably 10:30, we'd then go and have a breakfast. We'd go have a breakfast in the pub, and we'd go up to the house. We'd have time with the family. We'd chill out, and then we'd come back out in the evening. It's almost you get to an adulthood and you stop doing that. You just go, I'm just going to deal with this on my own, mate. Fuck, I'm not going to talk to anyone about this. What do you mean? But when you were younger, you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going out with Sally. Oh, she's right in our bed. You know what I mean? Or whatever. Or yeah, I'm absolutely besotted with, I don't know. There's me trying to think of a name. Lucy. Do you know what I mean? I'm absolutely besotted with Lucy. Oh, mate, yeah, she's stunning, mate. Yeah, I've noticed that, actually. And you'd all help each other out. You get to an adulthood and you think to yourself, you get to a sort of 17, 18, you hit adulthood and then you start fizzling out. You get into your 40s and you look around and you've got nobody. You're battling this shit on your own. And then you wonder why you're failing. You wonder why those suicides from 35 to 45 are so high. Because that is the time when you need people the most, because you're experiencing things like having children, starting careers, or getting into senior management positions in careers. So you're taking on a lot more responsibility. You could be managing people and their problems, and you're just harbouring it all. You're going home and you're going, okay, well, I'm just going to bottle it all up. And then before you know it, you got to the point where you're depressed, stressed, because you haven't shared the problem. You haven't spoke to someone about it. You haven't engaged, you haven't been out the weekend, or you haven't had a night out with your friends. So it's really important to do that. So, like I say, I hope that these symptoms and signs will give you some sort of food for thought, maybe to inwardly look at yourself and make sure that you haven't got these signs and symptoms. And if you have, then jump on Google and research how to get them back, or speak to your doctor, or speak to your friend and say, now, mate, I'm having these problems, or my sleep's all over the place, mate. I'm waking up at a stupid o'clock, and you're like, well, what did you do today? And you're like, not really a lot. Maybe you've got too much energy, mate. So what you need to do is go to the gym, release some endorphins, get the serotonin firing, or go for a walk. Get yourself out, mate. Put your music in, just go for a nice half an hour walk, burn a couple of 100 calories, get your legs working. These are all things that you can advise your friend or be advised about doing to make your life better. So these signs and symptoms are really important, and I hope that the stats have resonated with you, because it certainly did with me. Just to give you that ability to manage things. It's not easy. I'm not saying this is easy. It's never been easy for me. Although I feel in a better place, it's not easy for me. But I think by talking about them, what it does is it underpins the need for me to better myself and the need for me to get myself in a better place. And by knowing these signs and symptoms, I look out for them. I actively notice them now. So when I'm feeling a little bit depressed, I'm like, okay, well, what have I done that's made me feel this way? Who have I spoken to? How have they upset me? Etc., etc. Or I've had a really bad sleep. Okay, well, I had a drink last night, so that's obviously what it is. Or I didn't do anything. I sat at the desk all day and didn't go for a walk. Okay, well, that's what it is then. You've got too much energy. So you've sat there, you've dwelled on life because you're dealing with PTSD, and you've dwelled on things, and you've asked yourself the purpose of life, and you've woken up miserable as hell. These are signs and symptoms that we can all look for. Is your mate looking after himself? Or, is he wearing the same things all the time? He's not really dressing himself up. Is he trying to avoid going out to social situations because he doesn't want to dress up and look good? Do you know what I mean? These are all things we need to battle and we need to fight with. So, really important stuff here, really important stuff, and I hope it helps out. But like I said, if you need to jump on my Facebook and send me a message, if you've got something that you want to talk about, one of these signs and symptoms that you're not quite sure about and how to deal with it, then send me a message and hopefully I can help you out. If not, I can certainly do some research. I really enjoy it. I've enjoyed the life coaching aspect of this, and nurturing it, and I mean life coach for myself. So it's really important, and these signs and symptoms can actually make a difference, and you might actually save a life by understanding your friends rather than sitting there like we were at Christmas, mourning the life of a very young 38-year-old good friend, all because he wanted something to talk to. And I don't think that any of us, his network, I suppose I'm not really classing myself as a close friend, but a friend, but a close friend would have acknowledged those symptoms and signs, and I think that that's where we need to be educated. So a little bit of food for thought for you there, just a little bit of a one to sort of kind of think out, maybe inwardly look at yourself and see if you've got any of those signs and symptoms. Maybe look at your friends and go, oh, you know what, fucking Dave's been a bit weird the last couple of months. Maybe you need someone to talk to. Send them a message. It's really important to look after those people, and if someone reaches out to you, then reach out back, reply, because you might make the difference between them not sleeping and them, and them sort of kind of sleeping and getting through it. You might make that difference, and you might make their day. You might actually build them up enough. So yeah, there you go. Happy Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? It's not even Wednesday, is it? I've just realised it's Tuesday. Oh my God. There's me going happy Wednesday at the start of the conversation, and everyone's probably going, is it Wednesday? It's not, it's Tuesday. That's really depressed me. I shouldn't laugh about that. I just looked at the date on the bottom of my clock and it said Tuesday, and I went, oh, I've told everyone it's Wednesday. Happy hump day. No, it's not hump day yet. It's Tuesday. But hey, let's embrace it. Let's look after it, and maybe just have a little think tonight. Just sit down and have a little think. Just maybe think, okay, I've got a few of these signs and symptoms. Like maybe I have got a slight decline. What is making me decline? What is affecting me? Is it something that I can deal with? Is it something I can deal with now? Is it a quick fix, or is it a long-term fix? But even if it's a long-term fix, if you don't start it, it's going to be even longer, isn't it? You've got to look after yourself. You really do. I can't say it enough. I'm better because I'm looking after myself, and in turn embracing the people around me. So yeah, I hope you have a good Tuesday, and I hope you have a lovely evening, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care, everyone.